Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Step into the Pivot. We are so happy to have a new friend on with us today, Amanda Dixon. So, Amanda is clearly like a numbers geek, like I am, beginning her career as a tax professional, is an enrolled agent, which is awesome, and now does a lot of stuff in marketing. But we're going to talk to her today about a much more major pivot she's had in her life in the past couple years. So, Amanda, thank you so much for being here with us today.
I am so thrilled to be here with you ladies, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome.
Yes,
Eva?
welcome, Amanda. Thank you for being here with us. I want to share a very short story about how we met and what I noticed, and then I'll ask you to tell us more. So, we were together at an industry event, and then afterwards, we went out for dinner with a smaller group of friends, some new friends, some older friends, lovely, engaging conversation. And we were, just to contextualize it, in a restaurant. The meal took quite a long time. This was after a very long day, and everything was effervescent and positive, beautiful conversations. But it was even though it was really pleasant, I was noticing that I was getting, tired. And by the time we were all done with our meal and we're heading back to the hotel, several of us were chatting about potentially staying on to talk more, whether we were going to, keep hanging out at the hotel or do something else. Now, I'm noticing that my body's already sending me signals that, like, Evie, go to bed. But I am kind of bulldozing over that because I'm like, no, 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 I'm here. This is so special. When will I see, these people again? Bulldozing, bulldozing. You, meanwhile, so like power move, say, good night, everybody. I am turning in. This was really nice. And I'm not entertaining any possibilities. You didn't say it like that, but I'm not entertaining any possibility of now staying out further. I'm going to go rest. And you said something really cool. It was like, I'm going to go check in with my husband. And I noticed something different in how you did it than what I would typically hear at events like this. There was a certain certainty to what you were saying about this is what's really good for me. And it's a non-negotiable. And I like you all, and I'm leaving now. And I was
Yeah.
like, I am really curious about that. And then, the next day I did end up finding out more about what was behind that, firmness and certainty. So tell us about your pivot, your major pivot in your life, and maybe explain to our listeners and our viewers what was going on for you when you said, I'm not hanging out.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny that you mentioned wanting to bulldoze past those initial signals and do more. And I really related to that pre-diagnosis. So I'm going to share with you all about my multiple sclerosis diagnosis story. And feel free to stop me at any point, ask any questions. I am an open book and I love talking about this, not because it's a good thing, certainly not, but it's a wonderful opportunity to educate able-bodied people, but also especially women, because I feel very strongly that had I not advocated for myself as a woman with my healthcare, then I might not be in the position I am today. So back in 2020, this was March, April 2020. I'm sure we can all place ourselves back there at that period of time. And I said, well, let me engage in some self care. And my wonderful, fabulous in laws had gifted me a subscription to a Peloton app, and they had different workouts and things. So I did some yoga in my living room. And after I was like, okay, that was a good workout. I feel good. But the next day, unfortunately, I had a twinge in my left shoulder. And I said, well, I probably did something wrong. I'm not an experienced yoga practitioner. We all make mistakes. It could have been anything. But what I noticed was over the course of the next week, it traveled this nerve pain, this twinge all down the left side of my body. And that's where I went, okay, that's not normal. And funnily enough, when I checked into the doctor, I made an appointment that same week the nurse that I talked to, when she asked, "Why are you here?" Explained that reasoning, and she said, "Oh, yeah, nerve stuff is bad. You should definitely be here." And I was like, "Well, good. That's the goal, to figure out what's going on." So I saw not my regular primary care physician, he was unavailable. So I saw another PA, and she said, "Well, yeah, that sounds weird. Let's order an MRI and go from there, just to see what's going on." And so I had the MRI done, I believe that May of 2020, and it did show some activity. So whenever you get any sort of medical testing done and you get those initial notes back from the technician, yeah, I recommend don't read them before your doctor can explain them for you, because I was looking up terminology I had no business looking up, and I didn't know what it meant, but I saw the phrase multiple sclerosis and I got scared but went, "Well, we don't know what this is." And I funnily enough, was watching Dead to Me, which is a show that was on Netflix starring Linda Cardellini and Christina Applegate. And Christina Applegate, a few years later, has also been diagnosed with MS. So I think that that's an interesting, just something from the universe that's happened. And I was watching the show by myself, and unfortunately, this doctor, no good bedside manner, because she essentially just called me on the phone, didn't check how I was doing, didn't check if anyone else was with me. And she just sort of said, "Yeah, it's probably MS. Sorry. Um, we are going to schedule a neurologist visit, but that's going to be in October." And obviously, I broke down, just sobbing, terrified, because I didn't know what this meant. I had heard the disease name before because Selma Blair had been diagnosed and was going through that process a few years ago. And I saw her interview and saw, oh my gosh, that's so hard to go through. And here I am a few years later going through this thing with this disease that I had no idea what it was. And started Googling things. Again, don't recommend doing that because you're going to scare yourself. And so I was just in a really bad state. Called my husband crying, and he thankfully came home. We cried together and um, took the evening to be upset, and the next few days, of course, to be upset, because this was life-changing news that I got. And through the reading I did about multiple sclerosis, I saw that it was a progressive disease, especially if untreated. And I was doing the math in my head and I went, okay, October is months away. I don't know what this disease has been doing in the background. I think I've had it for years, since I was a child, just because of little things that I would experience that I thought were normal for everybody, which I have subsequently learned are not. Um, so upon learning that this was a progressive disease, I said, absolutely not. I'm not waiting until October. That does not work for me. I'm not going to put my body on the back burner. So I looked up, I'm in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, and I actually had family in Houma, Louisiana, which is more further towards the Gulf. And in a nearby town called Raceland, there was a neurologist who had an appointment fairly soon thereafter. And I booked an appointment with her. I told my husband, I said, "Look, let's take a Friday off of work. We can go visit my grandmother. We can make a whole weekend of it. And let's do this because I really don't want to put this on the back burner." So I drove down there with him, and he let me go into the appointment. And I told her about the symptoms I was experiencing, the nerve pain, the tingling, numbness. Various things that are going on. And she said, "Sweetie," now I know that it maybe in uh, every situation we don't call each other sweetie, but I'm in the South and she called me sweetie. And she said, "Sweetie, you're going to be okay. It's going to be all right. This does not need to define your life. And if you were going to end up in a wheelchair, you would probably already be having mobility issues right now." So hearing that, and hearing her say, this is probably what it is, but it's going to be okay, was so helpful. From there, she ordered a ton of blood tests and other tests, more MRIs and things like that, just because unfortunately MS is a elimination disease. It's something where you have to rule everything else out before you can definitively say, yes, it's this. And there is a specific criteria called the McDonald criteria, where if you have a certain amount of lesions and things like that, if it satisfies that criteria, a doctor can go, okay, it's definitely this. I unfortunately didn't satisfy the criteria at that point. So a different neurologist that I saw ordered a spinal tap for that June, which is another part of the diagnosis process, which is not abnormal. But a third neurologist actually that I was recommended to from my regular primary care physician, who he had worked with her during COVID, the peak of COVID anyhow. And he said she actually specializes in MS. She's not just a neurologist, she is an MS neurologist. And he gave me that recommendation. So I actually drove down to New Orleans with my husband the day before that spinal tap was scheduled to be performed. And she looked at my blood tests, looked at all of my MRIs. I had an MRI on my brain, cervical spine, which is this neck area, and then my thoracic spine as well. And based on the lesion activity, she said, you absolutely satisfy the McDonald criteria. And I said, so I don't need a spinal tap? And she said, no, you don't. And I said, great, and called and canceled it immediately because, I was nervous about doing that. So it was very relieving to have someone tell me, uh, definitively, this is what it's going to be, and this is what we're going to do from here on out. And we discussed treatments, and I chose one that I felt was going to be the best for me. The medicine that I'm on is called Okravis. I just go to the hospital once every 6 months. The fabulous nurses there hook me up. It's actually a chemotherapy drug, which I learned from my fabulous grandmother who's also a nurse. I thought chemo was just for cancer, but she explained that it's the type of treatment. It's not necessarily just for cancer. So I thought, oh, okay, so that's why I'm in that room with everybody else. But the treatment has been absolutely phenomenal. It is honestly a pretty easy day. I go there usually with my husband, but my mom has come with me before as well. And they have big comfy chairs, and you can adjust the lighting in your individual area. And we just sit and eat snacks and watch movies for the whole day. And then I go home. And thankfully, as a result of continuing to be on this treatment, I've had no new lesions, no disease progression ever since. And that is just the best news that I could have ever hoped for. And it has really made all the difference. So, just to give a timeline, I started experiencing symptoms, and then within 2 months was formally diagnosed and was able to get on a treatment. And I've since learned through there's a fabulous online community of fellow MS sufferers, and I've learned from them that oftentimes, especially for women, they're very, very frequently dismissed and just are told, well, you're tired. Maybe you're a new mom. Oh, that's normal because you're just tired because you're um, balancing all sorts of things going on. And it was so disheartening to hear that that's normal. Oftentimes, it can take years for a diagnosis. And I don't know where I'd be, symptom progression wise, if I had not stuck up for myself and said, no, I'm not going to wait till October. I want to get treatment as soon as I possibly can. And thankfully, it's covered through insurance. And like I said, it's a pretty easy day. So my life has absolutely been affected on a day-to-day basis. Before this, I was working in the office full time, and now through talking to my employer and making some adjustments, I'm part-time and mostly work from home, but that has made all the difference. And whereas before, I would say I was always pushing past those biological signals, now I listen to them definitively. And that reminds me of that story that you beautifully recounted, Ivana, because, I don't unfortunately have the option really anymore of ignoring those signals. So that instance was me telling you guys, hey, it really was a wonderful dinner. I am having a fabulous time, but my body's telling me I'm done, and I am ready to go lie down and check in with my husband on the phone and tell him about this fabulous day. So it's not that I'm not having a wonderful time. If anything, I would love to stay and do more, but I have learned to be okay with the capacity that I have. If I'm at 40% one day and I give 40%, that's me giving 100%, and that's okay.
Okay, just wow. Like, I'm just going to start with wow
Yes.
because I did not know your whole story, and often I like to be surprised. I've said that before. Um,
Yeah.
so many great things there, Amanda. I love number one that you completely advocate for yourself. I think that's so important. I don't think we do that enough in
Thank you.
any aspect of our life. I mean, there's all aspects of our life where we need to advocate for ourselves. I also love this story, the story about Sweetie, like Sweetie,
Hmm.
but you need to have, especially in those types of situations, you need to have somebody that says you're going to be okay. You will do that. So even though like I totally get what you're saying, like we don't normally say that, but it probably just pushed you that little bit more to be like, hey, okay, she says I'm going to be okay. She sees this, I'm going to be okay, right? Like it gives you
Yeah.
that framework, that mindset that okay, I can do this, I'm going to be good, it's all good. um I just love everything about that. We just kind of let you go and tell your story, but I think it was an amazing one. We have more questions for you, but can you,
Yeah.
before we do that, you have a very specific background that we talked about before we came on the podcast, and it is orange, which is one of
Hmm.
my favorite colors, but there is something very significant about it. Can you just talk really briefly about that?
Yes. So before my MS diagnosis, I really didn't have a great relationship with the color orange. It's not something that's super flattering on me to wear. We all have our color seasons, and I was like, meh, orange. But now I have fully embraced it because it is the color for MS. All sorts of diseases have different color
Mhm.
signifiers. So I learned that about MS, and at first, I'll be honest, I was a little disappointed. I went, man, orange, really? I like green. Green's my favorite color, but I have really learned to love it. It's such a bright, vibrant color. It's a color of life. Every
Mhm.
time I see a butterfly outside that's orange, I'm like, that's the universe telling me that I'm part of it and I'm gonna be here
Right.
and I'm gonna be okay. So that was my reasoning for picking an orange background today, was that I wanted to represent my color that corresponds to my story.
Absolutely love that. Even I know you
I
have, I know
yeah.
you have more to add to what I
Oh my
talked about. So
gosh. Well, I just love what you just said about like this is a sign. I'm paying attention to the signs and reminders that I'm here, I belong. I am, I am life, I am vitality, and there are choices I can make, including asking for help and support. And I feel like you did such a brave and beautiful job of giving us a couple of examples of how important it is to be kind and attuned when you're delivering news to someone about something big. And, we can joke about the words that the um, sweetie, the sweetie provider used, right? But it's really what you were describing. Her energy was exactly like this butterfly that you were saying, like, look, I'm here to
Exactly.
tell you, life is in you. You are life. So like, yeah, I know I'm sounding, spiritual and metaphysical right now, but there was this like, there was love in there. whereas the other person is giving you really important information that you have to know. So she is doing you a favor by telling you what's going on. Favor, I mean, this is a
Right.
phrase, right? But I mean, it's in your favor to know. Let me rephrase. It's in your favor
Mhm.
to know what's going on. You want to hear the results, but not like that. Like not
Yeah,
like that, because then we're
exactly.
entering the whole mental health and wellness journey. And
Mhm.
thank you for giving us that attunement. And I'm sorry you walked through the experience that was less than kind. And it's good to
Yeah.
hear that you have been also supported by folks who are more in present. So,
Absolutely. I should mention, so after getting the news, I took a leave from work for about 3 weeks and was not in a good state at that time, of course. And I found a nurse psychiatrist at that same hospital. And she said, I think what I'm trying to communicate with saying sweetie and things like that is that these women took the time to really, from a place of an older generation talking to a younger generation, make sure that I felt comforted and loved in that
Mhm.
situation. And I'm on a Zoom call with her, telehealth as well, just bawling my eyes out. And she said, look, take this time to be sad. This is normal. This is okay. Mourn the life that you thought you were going to have. Because, of course, everybody has these expectations that where they're going to go, what their life is going to look like. And yours certainly isn't what you imagined for yourself. But do not fall into this completely and do not let this define you. Because she said she had seen people that just absolutely sank into it and let the sorrow overtake them, and that's exactly what I've done. Was, I took that 3 weeks to take the time off, and through counseling and therapy work and also just personal spiritual work, I'm in a much better place than I was whenever I first got that phone call.
Yeah, and that's so important that you really did that, right? We have to have the time to grieve per se, right?
Exactly.
About that, but you have to also have the hope that okay, you may never cure this disease, but you are treating it. You are living a good life. You are doing all those things, right? Like life is not over because of this diagnosis, right?
Exactly.
Like for a lot of us. And I think sometimes we get in that spot, and we all have our ups and downs, and I'm sure there's still days where you have, the downs and think, why did this happen to me? But
Yeah.
most of your days are probably on the positive side, and you're embracing that, and I love that. Talk just a little bit about how this diagnosis helped you with your personal growth, your mental state, your emotional health. Like you talked about it a little bit, but let's just put it like kind of in a little package for everybody.
Yeah, so to put my journey in that aspect in a little shadow box, if I could, I would say before this, I really did not realize how much I was running myself ragged, if I'm going to be honest. The financial services industry can be one that demands a lot of you, and it demanded a lot of hours and a lot of, doing too much and working very hard. And there's nothing wrong with working hard, but I think that I was over my personal capacity and I didn't even know it. And I just kind of went, well, that's what you do. That's what you do. You work hard at your job and that's it. And I didn't really realize that there was another way to be. I didn't realize that I was enough as I am, and it's completely fine and normal to communicate your capacity to the people around you. Before this, I was working, during tax season. I started out as a tax accountant working crazy overtime. At previous jobs, this employer is a lot better and more mindful about our time, but it was still overtime. And pardon the pun, but it's taxing. It really is doing that type of work. And I wasn't making time for myself. And now have to make time for myself. And that's what I choose to do. And mentioning bad days, there's certainly bad days all the time. I just to touch on some of the symptoms I experience, it can be anything. MS is actually called a snowflake disease, and it's not because we're too sensitive or something like that. It's because each of us has different symptoms because based on where your lesions are, that affects the different symptoms you have. And you could have lesions anywhere in your brain and spine. So I have certain days where I experience debilitating fatigue, muscle spasms, nerve pain, brain fog here and there. And on those days, it's really hard to want to get out of bed and experience life. And sometimes I really can't get out of bed. And so those times are hard, but I've learned to go, okay, Amanda, you can be sad about this for a little while, but don't let it affect your whole day. So I've learned that we choose how we respond to things. We choose how we cope. And instead of choosing to go, well, when I'm staying in bed, I'm just going to go and feel sorry for myself. I certainly do feel sorry sometimes, but I don't let that overtake me. So I do what I can to make sure that I'm taking care of me. I like to imagine my inner child sometimes and that I'm doing these things to take care of her. So I might put on a favorite movie. I will gather my pets. I have a dog and two cats and hug them and maybe, eat something that my inner child would enjoy. And I've learned that just through taking care of myself, I am much more likely to be able to show up better for other people and keep my cup full.
Yeah, so beautiful. I wanted to say this part about the inner child that in some ways, is it true? Is it fair to say that you've had to learn how to be on the inside, kind to yourself like the kind providers were? So both,
Mhm.
hey, sweetie, it's going to be okay. Hey, like the other one, if we're sad right now, let's let that happen. Also, let's not, sink into the despair of it. What do you need? Like I can just hear you sort
Yeah,
of like checking in with yourself, based on the time that we spent together, a couple of months ago. Like, what do you need? What do you need? And catching when you're wanting to maybe be harsh with yourself. Like, yep, this is
yeah,
what it is. Wait until
yeah.
October. Like, no, no waiting until October. Is it fair to say that that's kind of how it goes on the inside a bit? That you have these choices, right? You can be unkind to yourself and rough, or
Yeah.
approach yourself with gentleness.
Absolutely. One of the counselors that I talked to, he taught me about positive self-talk and how our brains, I think I might have said this at the conference where we all met, but our brains are designed to keep us alive, not to keep us happy. So every day I am actively choosing to speak to myself in ways that are going to encourage happiness. It's very easy to get discouraged. Actually, earlier this week, I had a time where I thought that I was okay cleaning out this closet at work, and by the time I got home, I realized I had let myself get too hot and was unfortunately experiencing some symptoms at that time. And I was very frustrated and was a little down on myself. And then I caught it and I went, you know what? No, it's okay. You don't have to be perfect at knowing your disease all the time. Trying to monitor your own body and its own signals, it's a Herculean task sometimes. So I'm learning to, instead of go, well, you shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z, go, okay, that happened. That's in the past. What are we going to do to take care of ourselves now?
Beautiful. If you were to summarize this, because you're really answering our final question, how was all of this massive pivot that you've been, hit by and then moving through and living with, how has this been a step forward? You started answering it. Could you kind of summarize
Yeah.
it for us as we start to say goodbye?
Absolutely. So I think I might have alluded to this a bit earlier, but this is certainly something that no one wants, and I don't wish this upon anybody, but I really think that this diagnosis and this um, disability journey has been a blessing in disguise because before, I don't know that I would have known to take the time for myself and watch out for myself and to care for myself. So now that I'm doing that, I'm finding it so much easier to show up in a positive capacity for other people, but also for myself and to be kind to myself. Whereas before, I would say it was very easy to engage in the negative self talk that I think all of us do. And now that I've had the time to learn how helpful it can be to care for myself, it's made all the difference in the world. I constantly read up on this disease and diagnosis, and one of the things I learned was that if you speak to yourself negatively, your body can sort of over time go, oh, okay, that's what's going to happen, and not look towards the ways of helping you feel better. And learning that, I took the time to actually take care of myself, speak positively to myself. And I find that I've noticed a big change over these past few years. In the beginning, I was not nearly as kind to myself as I am now. So, the thing that I would summarize and what I would want everyone to know is to be kind to themselves because each of us is dealing with so much and we don't know just by looking at each other. Oftentimes people tell me like, "Oh, but you look good. You look great." And I'm like, "I do, certainly." But you might not know symptoms that I'm experiencing and trying to still push through at that time. And it's also taught me to be more empathetic to other people because I know if this is what I'm going through, who knows what other people could be going through on any given time, whether it be something personal or physical or mental. So I am just actively trying to be so much more kind and gracious to everyone around me, even, people that walk past me at the store, because I've really encompassed this idea in my head that we are all just humans, just trying. We're all just trying. And I think all of us trying, that's what matters.
I love that so much. And I say it all the time, and you said it, is that we never know what others are going through, right? And so having that empathy, having for ourselves, even, right? When we have something going on, we have to give ourselves the time to heal. So we are so thankful that you shared your story with us, that you were so open about it and talking about it. And you're going to get people who are going to come to you now and say, hey, I know maybe I was just diagnosed, can you give me some stuff? And that is the best thing,
Y-
right? You
Yes.
being an advocate for it, you sharing your story, you living with it, and having this positive attitude, I think are so absolutely amazing, Amanda. So
Thank you.
thank you. Even I'll let you kind of close, but thank you for being here with us today. I really enjoyed hearing your entire story, and we're going to have you back because I think there's way more we could talk about.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. It's going to be a really, an honor to re-listen to our conversation. You had so many shares that were just, gems of wisdom, and we appreciate you deeply. Thank you for educating us. Thank you for bringing your beautiful smile and your presence here and being so motivating and inspiring. So I really appreciate you.
Thank you both so much. This was absolutely just the best time, and I would love to come back and, share more. Like you said, there's so much to talk about, so I'm really appreciative of the opportunity today.
Awesome. Thank you to all our listeners for being with us this week. We really do appreciate it. And remember, if you have a pivot, step into it.